Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network weekly web series entitled Conversation Starters. I'm your moderator, Fese Longe, and I am excited to bring to you today's topic entitled HBCUs and Higher Education. And to help dive into this topic, I have some wonderful panelists that will be joining us this evening. So I want to go ahead and get started. Our first panelist joining us this evening is Dr. Samo Mays, who currently has a doctorate in education and sports management. He's also the director at Bryan County, Georgia Parks and Recreation, and also the founder of Minority Recreational Leadership Academy. And his interests are in bullying prevention. I welcome you, Dr. Samo Mays.
Yeah, thank you so much. Honored to be here.
Thank you. Our second panelist joining us this evening is Trina Bryant, who's currently a doctoral student in higher education and leadership at Regis College.
I think she froze. It's just you and me, Dr. Mays.
I know, she froze.
Well, let's talk about it. HBCUs, they're great, right?
Awesome. My first experience.
It's a pleasure to see you again and to chat with you.
Yeah, I was checking out your LinkedIn, good stuff.
I'm trying to get caught up with you all.
No, you right the same mission, same goals. You getting it done.
Thank you. It's definitely challenging with COVID.
It is.
I started my program years ago.
Yeah. I know we're like one of the few agencies in Parks and Rec that actually open, full tilt right now. So.
Oh wow, really? Are you limiting access?
We're the only thing we're limiting is indoor rentals.
Okay, that would make sense.
But we did do volleyball, and we got through it with no COVID cases, and we had our playoffs and championship. Now we're getting ready for basketball.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. Wow, that's great though that you're able to stay open and.
Yeah.
Oh, they will join shortly. We will resume with the interest. Okay.
Okay. You think they're gonna start over, huh?
I know. Well, hey, I can chat all day, so
we may need our own show, me and you.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, this is like totally an entrepreneurial season,
I tell you, man. Ever since I posted that meme and it went viral, man, my life has changed.
Wow,
it's all positive.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, what's your plan? Are you working on getting a TED Talk? Come on now.
I mean, I had applied for that like maybe 6 months ago, but I hadn't went back to it because I'm doing so many educational sessions and things like this. Yeah. So I'm just trying to finish out the year and try to be as safe as I can. And 2021, I'll probably get back into that. But I got a lot of speaking engagements. Yeah.
I know, and you got to make sure you're taking time to rest, which is important. I think I can't remember the gentleman's name, but before COVID hit, there was I think a TED Talk in Dorchester or something that was going to happen. They were planning for it. So I don't know. I didn't hear anything, but hopefully the people who applied, they'll still be able to share their story, even if it's
And I tell you what, I was really getting into right before COVID. I was hitting the school circuit. I was doing high schools and middle schools, and that cut me off. Yeah, that COVID.
Yeah, I know. And it's speaking of higher ed and HBCUs, it'd be interesting to see, how the pandemic, the election, the call for racial justice will impact all colleges, but especially HBCUs.
It's like perfect timing, right?
It really is. I mean, and there are some schools that it's be interesting. I'm not sure every institution will survive. I think there were issues with higher ed in general.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, a lot of disruption, but yeah.
Well, they're giving us props in the chat for carrying the show.
I know. Well, we should continue talking. So, I mean,
evidently we must be on live. So
I guess we still are. So
yeah.
But you said this was your first experience with with HBC. Did you go to an HBCU eventually?
Yes, I started out. I had a track scholarship, and my first year was at Savannah State. And the only reason I transferred because I wanted to teach in my hometown, and
Okay.
I changed my major and I went to Georgia Southern. But that year, Savannah State was the best year of my life. And
Wow.
I think me getting off track was me
Right.
leaving Savannah State. I should have stayed and finished that experience. I
Right.
was on the president's list and everything that first year.
Wow. And it sounds like, according to Dr. Turner Henderson, that you probably had a type of fictive kinship with the people there. Yeah.
Most definitely. I mean, the professors were awesome. I mean, it was like a family, and everything they did was magnified. It was just so big, everything.
Oh my goodness. It's funny. Like I did wind up going to a PWI, Northeastern University in Midtown.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because they did offer me some scholarship and the co-op. And at the time I did my first year on campus, and then I became a commuter. And so, it was important for me to think about, my debt ratio when I was in there. But, when I hear from students that had that experience at the HBCU, it sounds like a family. Like it was like 4 years of family reunion, and just that the fictive kinship that I can't stop thinking about and talking about.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it that was so special when I was there, and you talk about that family, it was like a friendly competition. In class, you wanted to excel, you wanted to be at the top, and it was like no room for failure. So, like I said, that experience was just remarkable.
Right. Yeah, and I also found that, like, a lot of the both male and female friends that I had who went to HBCUs, they have lifelong friends, but many of them found their spouses, and I think that was a struggle for me when I went to PWI. At PWI, again, I loved Northeastern, I loved the co-op program, but and they had a great international kind of multicultural vibe there, but it just wasn't the same connection. It also could have been because I was a commuter too, and I a single focus. I wasn't as involved, and that was okay. I was just like, I'm not going to an event unless I'm getting paid to go. Right. I was thinking about debt and and stuff like that. But but I actually had thought about I had considered going to an HBCU for my grad program, but it just worked out that this program really worked well at Regis, and it's actually a very diverse program, so that was really exciting. And it was just, in terms of budget and other things, that's important.
Right.
So when you remember your experience at Savannah, you said, right?
Yes, Savannah State, yeah.
Like, and I think about just some of the things I've been reading about HBCUs. What do you think? So we know, I think when we read the narratives of students, even like thinking about Chadwick Boseman or some of the heavyweights who graduated from there, like Toni Morrison, Howard, or we can't forget MLK, Morehouse. They all talk about that experience, and I remember going to a Black doctoral network at Harvard, and there was a speaker there, and he was talking about the difference between an HBCU and a PWI, and he said, when I went to an HBCU, they put a crown over my head, and they said, we're going to help you grow strong enough to really wear that crown. But when I went to a PWI, they put a question mark over my head. I think that the whole idea is fascinating. I kind of want to write a paper on the crown versus the question mark. So we know that there's this experience, but I guess my long-winded question is, why do you think some people choose not to go, even though we know that there are definitely benefits? Is it just money, or is it other resources?
Well, I'll tackle it from, I guess, perspective. With me being an athlete in high school and having that track scholarship, I chose that Savannah State because I had a classmate who was a year ahead of me that went there, and some other athletes were going. But I think it could be from an athletic standpoint, as we see some of the top athletes going to PWIs, Division I. But I think you see people like Deion Sanders, getting the job, and I think you're going to see a shift in that now. Yeah. And I think from an athletic standpoint, maybe that's why, but I think that's going to change with the way society is changing. And even with my organization, with the Minority Recreational Leadership Academy, a lot of my leaders that are in my organization went to HBCUs,
Yeah.
And they have some of the top jobs in America in parks and rec and athletics. So I just think that, when you look at it from a grander scale, I think it's all about opportunity, but we have some very, very prominent leaders with HBCUs, and I think the light is really going to shine on them right now with the way things are going.
Absolutely. Like, it's just, I think between COVID and just what's happening with the election, Dr. Turner Henderson said HBCUs are hidden gems of innovation and support for African American students. And I wholeheartedly agree. I have my notes. So there was a quote. I've been reading The Souls of Black Folks recently.
I ought to go get that off the shelf over here.
Yes, that's classic. I'm also reading this education of Black. It's just I'm in that mode right now, and I think it's because of the season. Right. But there was a quote, not in that particular book, but someone who was talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, his work. He said there are HBCUs are rare institutions where individuals of Black diaspora can unapologetically take risks, learn, and thrive without having to engage in a double consciousness. And that's, Dubois talks a lot about that double consciousness, and even Malcolm X talks about that ability to be in a community and find your true identity. And I think that's so challenging. That can be challenging in a PWI. And to your point, I think I do think we're going to see a shift. I think the way some certain PWIs have handled things and some of the statements they've made, and not to say that every single HBCU, perhaps made the most appropriate statement at times, but for the most part, I think a lot of HBCUs were really moving forward with saying, like, no, we need to dismantle racism. Like, this is a problem. And we're also a welcoming environment, not just for, I think, individuals from the Black diaspora, but we also know that other individuals are attending HBCUs as well. So I guess my question would be, what do you think? So we know that there are benefits. We also know that with things that are happening right now, people are really taking a more in-depth look. I think they were always doing it, but I think more and more people are like, you know what? I want to look at that. I guess my question would be, what are some things that leaders in HBCUs should be thinking about right now? I mean, this is an opportunity, but at the same time, when you look at the numbers, when there's some issues around funding and provide, like even the thing you mentioned with the athletes, and they just don't. The endowment gap between PWIs and HBCUs is obviously significant. Like, what are some things that you think, if you were maybe a president of a HBCU, what are some strategies you might try or consider?
I think it's, from a marketing standpoint, I think it's about marketing. I think that we need to know the individuals who went to HBCUs and see how prominent they are, how successful they are, and hear their journeys. So I think we need to know about more people than just Chadwick Boseman. We need to know about the potential vice president here, HBCU. Yes. And I just think it's from a marketing standpoint, I think that's what we need to see. Our young high school students need to see that we have people in prominent positions that went to HBCUs, and I think it's all about marketing yourself and just showing how you can be successful, or even more so successful, attending an HBCU, and that's one thing, with the organization that I'm a part of, that I'm trying to do, is just all about leadership. And even though it's a Parks and Rec organization, I have leaders from all different backgrounds and genres, because I think leadership is universal. Yeah. So, and when you start getting, where I'm at as a Park and Rec director, I'm really close to being, into politics or public administration or executive director. And when you get to that level, it's all about management. And I think people need to know that we have individuals who've attended HBCUs that are doing great things now, in my opinion.
Excellent. I believe Dr. Turner Henderson would agree with you. She's in the chat. HBCUs must see the period of time as an opportunity to be the thought leaders in the development and execution of diversity and inclusion industry programs. Along those lines, Dr. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And it's funny, I know we're obviously jumping around while we're waiting for people to get connected.
I am back.
Okay, we were in it.
For holding it down.
Oh yeah, we had
that was amazing. I was sitting back and just watching. But I appreciate that. Audience members, apologize for the technical difficulties. As you know, I'm not surprised. Everybody's probably online streaming and talking about the election. So these platforms are being heavily used right now. As you know, something critical and pivotal in our history is going on right now. So I thank you for those that are still tuned in. I thank you for Dr. Mays and Trina for continuing the conversation while we get things back on track. So I just want to go ahead and continue with the introductions and then jump into the content that we have here. So I believe I was in the middle of introducing Trina Bryant, um, who's a doctoral student in higher education leadership at Regis College. She's currently the executive director of the Center for Academic Success at Eastern Nazarene College. And she also has her research interest in mindfulness, resilience training, recruiting and retaining faculty of color, as well as academic success. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm sure our audience has already heard a lot of your thoughts, but that is wonderful.
I'll be quiet for the rest of the.
Again, I appreciate you all for doing that. Now, our third panelist joining us is Dr. Tiffany Turner Henderson. She has her degree in PhD in marketing from Hampton University. She's also the assistant professor of management and marketing at Johnson C. Smith University. She has a research interest in professional development, educational technology, sales and marketing, and also fictive kinship relationships, HBCUs. I thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I know you were behind the scenes for a little bit, but I was rest assured I was coming back.
We are a community.
I was trying to read your stuff. You had great things. I was like, oh, these are gems.
And our fourth panelist joining us is Dr. Jasmine Highsmith, who has a doctorate in education and sports management. She's a human resource professional. She's also the founder of Female Athletes Rock. She also has a research interest in educating young athletes, more so student athletes, development and success. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all. It's great. You guys were doing a great job earlier.
I know.
You carried it. Great job.
Thank you for your encouragement.
Well, I want to go ahead and continue the spirit and that you all have already started and gotten our audience relatively engaged, and just jump into some of the questions that we have here to facilitate the discussion. The first question that I have is, how would you describe the role of HBCUs in higher education? I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Tiffany Henderson.
What role doesn't it play in higher education? As I was saying in the chat behind the scenes, as Dr. Mays and Trina were speaking, they are hidden gems of innovation. If you think about the start of HBCUs from training the newly freed slaves and expanding the thought process, and the graduates we've had from HBCUs to go on and not only impact the African American community, but also society as a whole, it's just a hotbed of innovation. I keep going back to innovation because there are so many ideas that come out of HBCUs that may not be seen by mainstream or by PWIs until those graduates enter into mainstream industries.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bryant, what are your thoughts?
I hate to be repetitive, but I was thinking about that quote. I think, obviously it's been this HBCUs have played a significant role in history, from the Morrill Act, and even from the Higher Education Act of 1965. And I think one of the things when I think about HBCUs, I just think about the amazing artists, the amazing leaders, the amazing just individuals who have shaped this country. And so I really think that it's been the bedrock of this creative genius who have really, that some of them still walk among us, obviously, but who have, gone before us to create where we are today. And I really think that during this time period, I think more and more people, as Dr. Mays and I were talking about, I think more and more people are taking a second look at HBCUs, because it is a place, I think, especially for people of color, especially for Black people in the diaspora, to experience this a type of family while they are shaping their identity and finding out their role. So I just think it's so important, and I think there's so many things, so many strategies that higher ed, academia can learn from the success of HBCUs.
Well, thank you, Dr. Highsmith.
Yes, just piggybacking off of what Dr. Henderson and what Ms. Trina just said, it's basically an opportunity for Black students or whoever attends a HBCU to find their identities. I feel like at PWIs, you're a number, whereas at HBCU, it's pretty much a personable experience. And just thinking back to the reason HBCUs were created, why they were created, and that was our only option at one time. We couldn't even go to PWIs. So I think they play a huge role in the success of many of our Black leaders that led us, especially in the civil rights movement and where we are today. It just opened up so many doors for so many people.
Yes, definitely. And Dr. Mays, what are your thoughts?
I think it's about reteaching. I mean, when I was in high school, I wasn't that strong in math. I was like a C-, C+ student. First year at HBCU, I made an A in college algebra, So it's like just learning differently. It was tough and competitive, but I had a sense that the professors genuinely cared about me and wanted to see me be successful, and it was just that relationship. So I think it's all about learning differently, seeing things differently. And I think just growing within the confines of that structure. So I just think it's just a different way to learn, and it's more personal, in my opinion.
No, thank you for the information. I like how everyone provided their own insight to answering that question, and something that I was able to pull from that was formulating your own identity, or in the process of figuring out who you are and being in an environment that is nurturing and understanding of that. So that's very important. The next question that I have is, do you think that HBCUs are provided with the necessary resources to provide quality education to students? Go ahead and start with Dr. Highsmith.
Necessary, yes. Could they be given more? Absolutely. I think that as Black people, we're kind of used to like, okay, we're going to take what we have and make the best out of that situation. And that's what they do, because you can tell by I live in Houston, and across the street is U of H, and literally across the track, literally next door to each other is TSU. And you can see the differences in the campuses, if you stand in the middle of the street. And TSU produces some of the greatest athletes, greatest leaders to come out of there. And it's like, okay, so they do what they do what they can with what they have, but could they get more? Absolutely.
Definitely. And Dr. Mays, what are your thoughts?
I want to once again bring up the whole thing about the athletics. I think if we have some of these 5-star athletes start going to these HBCUs, you'll see that funding a little bit, because that's what drives, some of the PWIs is these top athletes. So I think once we start getting some of these top tier athletes going to these HBCUs, I think you'll see the funding get a lot better, in my opinion.
Definitely. And Dr. Turner Henderson, what are your thoughts?
I'll back up a couple of steps and talk about some of the differences even within HBCUs, because we do have a cohort of HBCUs that are funded with state taxes. So they do receive that additional revenue coming into their universities, versus private HBCUs, where the reliance is on increasing the endowment or industry and alumni giving and grants. So even within the HBCU community, you have two different segments. So there's even disparities there within HBCUs. But overall, yes, there is a need for additional funding, more recognition that investment in HBCUs will benefit society in the back end. So I do believe that starts to influence the number of programs that can be offered, the opportunities for the students to continue research so that they can promote what's happening at that HBCU, which, as Dr. Mays was saying, becomes the marketing and the branding for that HBCU. So I think that actually needs to be addressed in the coming years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Ms. Bryant, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what everyone has said. I the only thing I would add is I'm really interested to see how our current climate really shapes Black philanthropy, because I think starting with, and I forget his first name, but Mr. Smith, who pretty much paid out, I think, this graduating class, or was it last graduating class of Morehouse grad?
Yes.
And so I feel like we're going to see more of that. I think people are recognizing that this is a necessary investment, and so I think the state, the federal, they definitely have their role to play, and they can give more. But I would also be interested to look at how philanthropy kind of shifts during this time as well, because I think that could help with kind of closing the endowment gap you see between HBCUs and PWIs.
Okay. Well, thank you all for that response. So it's collectively there is a need for more resources to really develop what we currently have, which is very necessary. Third question that I have is, do you believe that leadership practices at HBCUs differ from PWIs? And if so, why and how do they differ? Dr. Mays.
I think they do differ because my experiences at HBCU, the PWI was completely different. And the leadership was, they were really tough on you, but they pulled you to the side after class and said, "This is why I did this. I'm doing this because I want you to be better." So it was really, really tough, but you learn to appreciate that. So I think the leadership is more like transformational leadership, because I'm going to be tough on you. I want you to do better, but I'm also going to pull you to the side and tell you why I'm doing it so you can respect me. So I definitely think the leadership practices are very different at HBCUs.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Turner Henderson.
I think there is a difference between the leadership in HBCUs and PWIs, and it kind of goes back to what Dr. Mays was saying. I think as an HBCU, we tend, and I say we because that's been my career and my academic background at HBCUs. That's all I know. But I would say that decisions that are being made within HBCUs, and I'm not representing all HBCUs at all, but it is more of that village mentality. Let's have a discussion. Everyone has a buy-in, everyone has a say. So it is a village decision about some of the changes in programming, the strategic planning of those universities, and it's not confined to a small group of people that sit in the towers of the university. So I would say it was different. It's more of a communal vision.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Highsmith.
Yes. From my own personal experience as a PWI graduate, I definitely think the leadership practices differ. Back to what Dr. Mays and Dr. Henderson just said, is the community feel. I can remember not really seeing my president except when there were like big functions on campus. Whereas my friends that attended HBCUs, they know that their president. They know they can send an email like, "Hey, can I have a letter of recommendation?" Like those type of things. And then there's no one, like everybody's a stakeholder in the education of the students there. Yeah. It doesn't just rely on just the professor to get them through, or So I think the leadership is absolutely different.
Okay. And Ms. Bryant, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said, and especially Dr. Hyde-Smith. I went to a PWI, and so I rarely, can probably count on my one hand how often I saw the president. But the stories that I heard from my peers who went to HBCUs, it was again this community, and I haven't really studied the governance, but I'm assuming what we're observing is perhaps a more shared governance, perhaps in HBCUs more so than PWIs, and so it'd be interesting to again see how that changes as we move through this pandemic and just this climate change. I think more and more colleges in general are going to be looking at that governance model, but I definitely think that community piece in the HBCU, I think, starts at the top. That community feel has to start with the leadership. So definitely a difference.
Okay. No, thank you. And it just goes to highlight when we're talking about leadership practices that there's not just one style or practice type, and just being diverse in their approach. And as you all have stated, that community aspect that HBCUs do bring to the student body as well as faculty is very important. So the next question I have, and we're still going in the direction of the the concept of HBCUs and their role. And we're going to talk a little bit more about a specific population, Black student athletes, that are huge contributors to, the success of universities and colleges. And the question that I have is, Black students athletes attract money and attention to universities and colleges that showcase them and support them. Do you think that HBCUs are adequately supporting Black student athletes as compared to PWIs? Go ahead and start with Dr. Highsmith.
I was a student athlete, University of South Florida track and field, and I don't think that, again, it goes back to the resources that HBCU athletics has versus PWI athletics. When I was in college, when I was in high school, I didn't get many visits many contacts from the HBCU coaches, but all of the PWI coaches in my state, I'm from Florida, Miami, Florida, were in contact with me. Visits here, you want to visit here, you want to come here. And then there's that population of student athletes from homes and communities where they don't see much. So when you take a visit to a PWI and they sell you a dream with all this glitz and glamour, it's something special, and sometimes HBCUs cannot offer that. It's a money thing for PWIs. They can flash you keys to Death Valley in Louisiana, and you're like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. And other schools can't do that. But I think if they were able to get a feel of the culture and what you can actually gain from an HBCU, more athletes would be. And like my fiance went to Southern. I'm like, they should bring student athletes. They're recruiting. Bring them to homecoming. This is like the best time of year. This is like everybody. I told him last year, I was like, if I had to do it again, I'd go to HBCU for sure.
Awesome, and thank you for breaking it down like that. You clearly can resonate with this question because, as you said, you were a student athlete. Mm-hmm. So, what are your thoughts, Dr. Turner Henderson?
I think I'm going to echo what Dr. Highsmith was saying. It is what are our HBCUs working with as far as monetary funds? It goes back to Dr. Mays with branding, marketing. How can we bring in those businesses that will sponsor events, who will contribute to the athletic fund? The other thing that we're also seeing in our HBCUs they're moving out of the traditionally HBCU athletic association. So you normally have the CIAA, you have the MEAC, and you have the SWAC, and I probably missed another one. I'm sorry if I did. But you have a number of HBCUs that have left the MEAC to go into the PWI arena or divisions of athletics. I know at Hampton University, they moved from the MEAC into the Big South, and that put a different spotlight on the players. So those things are happening to increase the visibility of athletes at HBCUs.
Okay. Dr. Mays.
I want to agree with what my panelist said, but I think what we should do is we should realize who are some of the greatest athletes in the history of sports. Jerry Rice.
Yep.
Walter Payton.
Yep.
Doug Williams, first Black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I think we need to go back and look at the history and look at a couple of the best football players in the history came from HBCUs. So once again, I'm all about the branding and marketing. You have to go back to your history to see where these players came from. And then we got to look at where we are now with Deion Sanders getting the job. Some of these big time recruits, just take a chance, go to HBCU, go on a visit like Dr. Highsmith said. So I think if we look at the history and where we are now with the way society's changing, I think we're going to see a shift in this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely. And Ms. Bryant.
Yeah, my panelists have pretty much said it all. I would be interested, again, I'm really interested in philanthropy, and I'm wondering, to highlight some of these heavyweights in athletics in HBCUs, can we get donors to donate and actually name a scholarship after these individuals? And so each school kind of has that. And so where that's continuing to be at the forefront of our mind, celebrating greatness, Black excellence, but also recognizing that this is an institution that will support athletes, but student athletes too, right? We want student athletes. I think sometimes the athlete part comes before the student. So I'd be interested in looking at the marriage of philanthropy and actually acknowledging those heavyweights in history. But I also think going back to community, I think I was reading something, I don't know if it was Forbes, but there are quite a few athletes who are really calling to task the NCAA. They're on PWA campuses, and they're like, I'm tired of having this racist experience in this, whether I'm on the field or in the locker room. And so I think that, again, you're going to see this shift. Some people are like, it's not worth my mental health. I am going to go to a place where I feel safe and I can enjoy the sport too. So it would be interesting. There was a, I'm trying to remember, it was the United Black Student Athlete Association, I think, started in Southern California. And so I think during this time, you're seeing a lot of young athletes who are mobilizing and saying enough is enough. So it'd be interesting to see how that impacts athletics on HBCUs campuses as well.
No, thank you all for breaking that question down, because I think what a lot of, people fail to realize, like Dr. Mays highlighted, we have some very pivotal historic legends that have come from HBCUs, and people fail to be like, oh, well, I may not go there because of, like Dr. Turner Henderson, maybe funding and availability of programs, but these environments are set there to nurture and develop Black excellence at the end of the day. So thank you all for highlighting the importance of that and how they can actually support Black student athletes. The next question that I have is, what type of policy interventions would you propose to address challenges faced by HBCUs, as we talked about limited funding, aging infrastructure, things of that nature, and affordability? Let's go ahead and start with Dr. Turner Henderson.
Oh, you would start with me on that one.
Tag, you're it.
All right, I'll bring on my sales background. So again, I'm going to echo Dr. Mays again. It is about the branding and the marketing and the alignment. On one end, we can continue to voice that need for additional funding from the federal government to keep our historical Black colleges and universities open. We need to have some partnerships to ensure that we keep accreditations across the board, because that's been some issues too. I also think that HBCUs can continue to forge mutually rewarding relationships with industries, whether they're local or regional or the big names. I believe it was, and I may be incorrect, I believe that it was Google that's partnered with Bowie State University to have a program to train the students to go into the technology fields, and I believe there's maybe 5 other HBCUs they partnered with. But having those relationships not only brings funding into the universities, it also brings a little bit of that business structure in, so that they can strategically plan about revenue coming in, the product going out, which is the students, which feeds the candidate pool. And again, those alumni, strong alumni in HBCUs, push for their companies to give back or match donations into those universities. So it becomes a cycle of support, partnership, product, and giving.
Absolutely.
Thank you for providing that conceptual model for us to really understand how it comes from a marketing and sales perspective. Ms. Bryant, what are your thoughts?
Dr. Henderson stole my thunder. I was going to say all that. we're like a hive mind at this point, because it's our second panel. But no, I was going to say, I think strategic partnerships are, and by the way, I think higher ed in general, I think institutions are looking at strategic partnerships, but HBCUs, I think one thing that we need to continue to do is make sure that we find a way, even if we push our way to the table, at the federal level, at the White House. I don't care who's in office. We need to be on the agenda when it comes time to structuring the bill. There needs to be funding for HBCUs. But I also agree, as Dr. Henderson mentioned, there's partnerships. I think it was, Netflix and Norfolk, I believe. Yes. That is amazing. That's amazing. It's almost like Netflix is creating their own pipeline, and I think that's amazing. But it's great from a marketing standpoint. But I also, again, I'm really interested in, maybe I will change my dissertation topic, but I'm really interested again in philanthropy. Like, can we continue to teach that so that our alumni are ready? And as they go off, because we know that they are doing amazing things, can we also build a partnership with whatever company that they begin or whatever program that they are involved in? And so there's just this cycle. But I think just strategic partnerships are so important.
Definitely. Dr. Mays.
Great points. I think what some of these entrepreneurs and some of these people with these miraculous and these awesome careers, I think in the organizations they work in, I think their organizations need to highlight that they went to HBCUs. And what I'm saying is, I think that they need to highlight, I went to HBCU. This is what I'm doing now. Some of these lawyers, these judges, these doctors, these engineers. And I think if people can see that, I think enrollment is what we need to increase at the HBCUs. And if people can see individuals being so successful coming from there, I think that's the number one thing, is for people to see that you can be as successful or more successful by going to HBCU.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Highsmith.
Getting out of our way of thinking. Like, some people think we've been doing it like this way for so long. Let's just keep doing it. Nothing's broken. But I think that with the new generation of kids that's coming in, and even with dealing with millennials, how do you get that group of people to give back to their school? How do we get these kids to come to college? Because now everybody's pushing the whole entrepreneurship, like, go be an entrepreneur and nobody needs college. So that's actually a great way for HBUs to, like, hey, come here. We produce many entrepreneurs. You need this to take on that. So it's just getting out of an old way of thinking and getting with the times, just trying to transform our thinking.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And this is why I wanted to have this discussion this evening, because people, I don't believe, and, just speaking out to our audience member and people that are watching that don't really understand the power of the HBCUs, the history, the principles that HBCUs put out there. And as our panelists have mentioned, the development of programs, strategic relationships and partnerships, and just highlighting that this individual went to an HBCU and associating that with them does bring more, I believe, recognition to the greatness that is within the HBCU system. So I thank you all for highlighting that. The next question that I have is, how have HBCUs contributed to student achievement among African American males and females? Ms. Smith. You're up, Ms. Smith. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think we can't hear her.
Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
No, I think you're on mute.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
I can.
Okay. I think you may be on mute, Ms. Smith.
Yeah.
Well, while she figures that out, I'll go to Dr. Turner Henderson. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, this is my baby here.
Let's take up the whole time. We don't need to.
I'll give time for Dr. Highsmith to come back. So again, this is my baby, because I matriculated through undergrad, grad, and my doctoral program at an HBCU, and I teach at an HBCU. So again, this is what I do every day. I've experienced and what I try to give back as well. So when you come to an HBCU, it is a different world, not to coin the phrase of the show, but it is a different world where there is a sense of community, of common experiences. There is support. There is what I've done as my part of my research with my colleague, Dr. Maureen Leary, is the fictive kinship network, that extended family that happens for a student once they enter into an HBCU experience. So you're okay to fail. There's someone who will help guide you through. You're not just a number. I think someone had mentioned that you're not just a number and just a student who comes through, my class. Sometimes I know more about you than maybe your neighbor knew about you in your neighborhood that you came from, because you share those experiences, because you're trying to find your way. And when you develop those relationships, it goes beyond mentoring. It's not just an academic mentoring experience. It is helping them to understand some of some people call it transferable or soft skills. And I heard my colleague, Dr. Jones at JCSU said yesterday, those power skills. How do you navigate as an African American or a minority once you have left the halls of your HBCU? How do you overcome imposter syndrome? Because our students are brilliant, but when they enter into their careers, they feel that maybe I can't stand up against someone who came from a PWI. And building that self-efficacy that, yes, you can overcome those difficulties. You can critically think and find your way, pull on the skills that you had in this learning, nurturing environment. So I think that is how we can continue to have successful African American or minority students coming out of HBCUs. Keep that community, build that self-efficacy, and let them know you can sit at the table with the best of them.
Thank you for highlighting something a lot of research has really started to embark on, in the imposter syndrome. That is very real and relevant within the African American community as you start navigating when you start getting into the real world and dealing with other doctors or other professionals. Dr. Highsmith, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome back.
I'm not sure what happened
on tonight, but we're here.
I think they contributed greatly to the success of student achievement. I'm so honored to know so many HBCU graduates, and I feel like they have a different confidence about themselves when they step into the world and when they present themselves, when they get in front of audiences. I'm almost like, okay, maybe I should have took another route, but I think they've done a great job just preparing them for the world, because I tell people all the time, you have your whole life to be discriminated against. If you can go to an institution where you don't have to deal with that, do it. Because once you get into the world, it's going to happen anyway. But if you can take away from that moment and enjoy college and really get the full college experience without having to deal with some of the issues some of us have dealt with at PWIs, I think that's a great thing.
Thank you for that. Ms. Bryant, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as I said, I think hive mind, we're thinking alike. I think before when Dr. Mays and I were talking, we were talking about W.B. Du Bois's the whole concept of double consciousness, and I do think that an HBCU experience allows some individuals to really grow and to learn and to be shaped into the person that they're meant to be without having to experience that. And so I think it's really important. I also, in my previous presentation and some of my work around retention, we're really looking at a lot of theories around Schlossberg's theory, for example, of mattering and marginality. And, we just know from research, if we were just talking about just a PWI or any school, that students who persist are students who feel like they belong and they don't feel like they're marginalized. So, if a PWI can figure out how to do that, to create the sense of community, to create fictive kinship on campus, and I think we'll see a different persistence rate for students of color. But we're just not seeing that, and that's because it's hard because it comes from leadership. And I think HBCUs are just ahead of the game, and they have a lot. PWIs have a lot to learn from HBCUs.
Thank you for those points, Dr. Mays.
I believe that a student who graduated from HBCU tends to look back and pull people up. I think once they get in those roles of leadership, they're more apt to reach out, to start organizations to help others become leaders such as them. Because I think that they realize, to get where we are now, all of us, you got to work 10 times harder than the next individual. So when you make it to the top, you're going to make sure you're going to reach back and teach or mentor and help somebody else get there. So that's what I think is instilled in HBCU students.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that point, and in anything going back and giving back, because we are the pioneers. We're moving within times and different eras to try and continue the legacies of HBCUs. So that's very important. The next question that I have is, how imperative are external factors such as community, local organizations in supporting HBCUs? Ms. Bryant.
Well, I think we actually touched. Well, at least maybe I touched a little bit upon it in my early response around. I'd be interested to again look at philanthropy and how we can build this culture of giving to HBCUs. And I think it starts from that first year in college that there's this understanding that we're going to give back. And I don't know if it's really highlighting some of the heavyweights that Dr. Mays mentioned, if it involves that mentorship between alumni and first year students. But I do think that philanthropy is going to play a big role, but I also think who's in office is going to play a big role as well. And so I think it behooves us to be very much involved in what's happening on the political landscape as well. But I think that I really think that alumni are, if we can kind of continue to create that culture, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they push forward and how they continue to fund this program. There was a school, and I can't remember, it was last year, where they were really struggling. I think they were going to close, and they just fundraised like nobody's business. And I can't remember the name, so if anyone remembers, please. And they're still around, and that just yes, we need federal, yes, we need state, but I also think there's so much power within us and so many resources that I think we also play a significant role as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Turner Henderson.
I'll make a left turn a little bit off of the path that Ms. Bryant was going down. Being in the classroom, not only do we need those relationships with industry, we need those relationships with local government, federal government, but we also need those relationships with communities and industries to provide our students with experiential learning, to give them that hands-on experience. If they are learning a particular subject, how can I work with the community as an instructor or a university so that our students are helping our community, helping our nonprofits, going back to Ms. Bryant again, helping those who need help. And in turn, they are learning the skills that will make them competitive in their job market. So that's another way that, working with the surrounding area will benefit HBCUs.
Thank you. Dr. Highsmith.
Just going back to what Dr. Henderson said and Trina, it's very important that the community as well as the school districts in the area help and foster those kids into those schools. Just the community, the local businesses, chain businesses, all those big things are a part of the grand scheme, and most people they have that support. So if the HBCUs get the same support, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to compete with one another.
Good point. Thank you. Dr. Mays.
And I once again, I guess piggyback off of seeing the individuals that have been successful coming out of HBCUs, all the different careers, all the different genres and all the things that people have done and what they're doing now is once again very important because it's all about marketing. I mean, if they're going to make a choice between an HBCU and a PWI, who went there? Athletically, who went there? Who went there? In law. So, like I said, once again, the marketing and seeing how successful all these HBCU students are, I think is very important.
Okay. No, thank you for that. And I love how we've really dug deep into this topic, and I hope the audience has been able to relate to a lot of what is being said here and with regard to the importance of HBCUs. And I want to we've talked about the role of significance, and I want to just bring it all together by asking, what are some ways that we can continue to develop HBCUs' importance within higher education? Dr. Turner Henderson.
I think that we need to increase the research and the student research that's coming out of HBCUs, again, showing the product that is produced in the halls of historically Black colleges and universities. I think, again, going back to what we've said before, forging those mutually rewarding relationships with industries keeps the idea, the names of the colleges in the mouths and the minds of these companies as they look to partner or they look for diversity and inclusion, that they know these are the HBCUs, these are the programs that are housed within those universities. So I think those two ways could be very helpful in continuing.
Thank you. Dr. Highsmith.
I think that education, one, is important. Continue to educate everyone about HBCUs. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people that have never gone to college before. They don't know anybody that went to college. And unless you know someone that's been there, you probably would, I mean, in the internet age, but you probably won't hear about it. So continue to educate our young kids about HBCUs. I know some high schools do a great job of showcasing colleges throughout their hallways, and I think that's a great tool that the schools can do. Education is also education and then community support.
No, thank you. Dr. Mays, what are your thoughts?
I think that more individuals that graduate from HBCUs need to start organizations. Just the collaboration of individuals that went to start organizations, so people can, that's a good thing. Research, so you can have people to display research, to show what they're doing now. So I just think that more individuals need to start organizations, so people can join those organizations and see what's out there and what's being offered professionally.
Well, thank you. And Ms. Bryant, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love the idea of and I can't remember the school, but schools really highlighting colleges and making sure that HBCUs are also highlighted. I think it's sometimes schools tend to highlight the Yales and the Harvards, but we need to be highlighting the Morehouses and Xavier. And I think that's really important because that starts super early. And so really getting the idea of HBCUs in the hearts and minds, I think it'd be interesting for also kind of alums to really partner also with schools and also do a showcase there where students can interview, guidance counselors can interview them, and I think that's important. I agree with Dr. Turner Henderson about research. Research is important, and not just I think the STEMs, when you look at those numbers, we are producing lawyers, we are producing people in the STEMs. And I think like really highlighting that research is really important, but also highlighting the research as it pertains to the academic success for students in HBCUs. That's important. And again, a lot of these PWIs are struggling with how to retain. What do we do? What do we do? And we're like, hello. And I think we need to own that, celebrate that. And that should also be a part of our marketing as well.
No, thank you. And as we can see, a lot of the audience members are agreeing with you all with regard to the thoughts and recommendations on how to continue HBCU roles in higher education. But I just want to say thank you all as we conclude this evening's discussion for joining me this evening and just sharing your insight and information with regard to HBCUs and higher education. And I want, just for the audience purposes and just for, there's a lot of things that you have talked about and they may want to be able to connect with you all more. So if I just ask you all just to provide a little bit of contact information. Dr. Turner Henderson, how can the audience get in contact with you?
So I am on LinkedIn at Tiffany Turner Henderson, and that's Tiffany with an IE. And you can also find me on Twitter and also on Instagram at PhDTNT. And you can also find me at PhDTNT.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dr. Highsmith.
Yes, I am on LinkedIn, Jasmine Highsmith. And then you can contact me via email at info@femaleathletesrock.org, or I on Instagram, Female Athletes Rock, or on the website, www.femaleathletesrock.org.
Awesome. And Miss Bryant, how can we get in contact with you?
I haven't quite gotten into Twitter yet, but you can find me on LinkedIn, just Trina Bryant, Facebook, Trina Bryant, and Instagram, Trina Renee.
Okay, perfect.
Thank
you. Dr. Mays.
You can reach me via email at samos.mays@bryan-county.org. And check us out at the Minority Recreational Leadership Academy. That's mrlainfo.com.
Perfect. This has been a wonderful evening despite the technical difficulties. And I really want to tell the audience member, thank you for hanging on during this time. And I hope you all learned a lot about HBCUs and their place within the higher education. And just as we leave today, I hope you all were able to join last week's conference, the Black Tutorial Network, that took place, and you were able to attend a lot of the workshops and panel presentations, etc. And for continued information, please join us on Facebook at Black Tutorial Network. Also, you can follow us or look us up online, blackphdnetwork.org. And as we always say, we are talking about a lot of topics that are relevant to our community. So please share, comment, and bring all your family or friends or colleagues to continue watching Conversation Starters. And we look forward to seeing you next time. I am your moderator, Fesse Longe. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.